Hello and welcome to Books Up Close, the podcast. I'm Chris Lloyd. This is the close reading show for writers, readers, and anyone who wants to know how texts get made. In today's episode, I talk to the Torrey Peters about a passage from her story/novella Stag Dance. Torrey Peters' first novel, Detransition Baby, won the PEN Hemingway Award 2022 and was shortlisted for the 2022 National Book Critics Circle John Leonard Prize for Best First Book, a Times Top 10 bestseller. It was longlisted for the 2021 Women's Prize for Fiction. Her follow-up, Stag Dance, is a quartet of short stories that explore trans life, past, present, and future. And the paperback is out now in the UK. Okay, well, Torrey, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
This is really exciting. I'm a huge fan of your work. I've been screaming about these two books forever, so I'm really excited to talk about this one. And of the four stories, whatever we call them, in Stag Dance, this was the one. I was like, there's no question for me in my mind that we would talk about this one, because for me, it's the one that seems most interested in language, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I absolutely agree.
And I saw you at the Royal Festival Hall maybe last year talking about it, and I think you said something like, oh, you didn't know where to go after writing Detransition Baby. You're like, I'm going to write a story for me that's in like logger slang from the 19th century. You're like, no one's going to be interested in this, but Torrey, people are really interested in this.
I'm glad to hear. It was a sort of a perverse, I think, looking back on it now 2 years later, I think it was like a little bit of a perverse impulse on my part, where, Detransition Baby, when it first came out, it was like, to me, I thought it was like, this is a transgressive book, and, it was like the bug chasing on page 7, like, but the thing about when a book circulates is it becomes kind of like, and this is really like a preoccupation of like me and my own pettiness, but it circulates and it becomes sort of considered mainstream, and then in a certain way, it's considered like people would be like, "Oh, Detransition Baby." Like, I don't know if I want to read that book. That's a book for like my mom's book club in Indiana or something like that, And I was like, I thought I wrote this like hardcore book. Right. And I remember it was like, there was at one moment, it was like a New Yorker clue that Detransition Baby was like it was a crossword puzzle, and Detransition Baby was the answer. But the clue was something like super insulting that was like, I'm proud to be chick lit, but it was basically something like, that's what this is. And I was like, wow, I feel like a little misunderstood. And I think all of this was like subconscious. And so then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to write an entire book in logger slang. So, suck on that. Like, which is maybe not like the best way of planning out one's career and relating to whatever it was. But I think all of that, like, in looking back 2 years later, I'm like, there was some stuff going on that led me to decide to do this. And I'm happy. I'm very happy. I'm very proud of it and very happy I did. But I don't think I was like, what is the next best career move? It is this.
But in a way, it kind of is, right? It's like for every New York Times idiot that's like, oh, this is what kind of writer you are. You open this book of 4 stories, you're like, wait, Torrey's like another 4 different kinds of writers,
Yeah.
And this one in particular is so charged linguistically. There are some great words in this extract that you're going to read for me soon that I just love. And I'm like, how do I fit this into daily speech? Don't know. But it's like really fun linguistically. So I thought it would be a great bit to talk about. But before we do, how do you feel about close reading? Do you have a relationship with that as like a practice or an activity?
I go in and out of it, like, I think that like, it's something that I think it's important to do as an author, and I think that like, for a long time, I was sort of like, the words you put on a page are like a pretty close approximation of the like kind of thought that you're doing. And so you want to have like really good words to like reflect really good thought. I think in school it's different, but like as a working author, like I don't have another job, I just work on my writing. I think there's a way. I have been like a little against close reading of late, actually. So sorry to go against the theme. I'm going to say something controversial for your podcast,
please.
But I think there's a way in which, for students, I think it's great. But I think that like on the sort of like literary industrial complex, kind of like going around as an author doing stuff, I right now think that there's a kind of fetishization of craft. Like I love craft,
Mm,
but I think craft can be really fetishized, not in like almost like a typically Marxian sense, where it can become fetishized as a commodity that will give you a career. And so
mm,
people end up talking about craft in sentences, not as like, we like this is art that made us feel something, but like, oh, this is a good sentence. And if you can write a good sentence, you can get a book published. If you can get a book published, you can get a career, you can do all that sort of stuff. And so there's a way in which like I've heard people talk about close reading in sentences and look at this, this pyrotechnic little thing
mhm.
where I'm like actually kind of weirdly about producing a product that can be sold in a marketplace rather than art that can move people. And so I've been a little like I'm proud of my sentences. And I think that I was somebody who like was like, check out what I can do in language. But I'm a little more wary of it these days, because I think, I've just been invited to teach a lot of workshops where I'm like, what I'm actually doing is like not art. I'm saying here's how to write a good sentence because people think it's a product that can be sold.
Well, I hope our conversations.
Yeah,
I feel very complexly about close reading, right? Like the history of its
yeah,
teaching has, there's very dubious
yeah,
origins of close reading that's like all decontextual, right? It's like, let's not think about
yeah,
history or
yeah,
anything behind the text. And I'm not really into that. I don't know, if I had a close reading strategy, it's very vibes based. It's like, what
yeah,
stands out to you? What do you notice? What goes on? Maybe we understand it, maybe we don't. And I'm really interested in the kind of like ambiguity in it all, right?
yeah.
And kind of feeling strangely about a text and be like, why that word, not this word, as a kind
I
of
mean,
way
I
into thinking the text more.
in a nerdy way, like I love that. Like, when I was in school, I was like very into like seven types of ambiguity and I liked the idea of that the text is all there is on the page and
Yeah.
the author's intention doesn't matter so much. And like if I was operating in a context where like everybody thought that, then it would be
Yeah.
like a fun game, to close read. But like the fact that like, it is an industry now, whether it be like for being a professor or being, can I sell a book or
Yeah.
do whatever, like it's not like the same as if it's 1920 and we can just be like, oh, the author's dead and let's just look at the text and it,
Yeah.
in a sort of like hermetically sealed setting.
Hmm. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
no hermetically sealed at this point. It's 2026, people.
Yeah.
Okay, well, in which case, why don't we hear you read this passage?
Yeah.
Listeners, this is chapter 13 of Stag Dance, the story or novella or whatever you want to call it. And it comes near the end of the end of the chapter. So yeah, let's hear it
Yeah.
first.
Can I start out by saying this is
Of course.
actually like the end of like an ostensible sex scene where the main character compares sex with degloving, which is when the skin of your hand is ripped off. So sounds sexy, I know. Everyone, cold water after
Yeah,
hearing
let's all
that,
calm
but
down.
yeah. But anyway, here it is. Well, now, here's my point. Each morning, a lop-limbed man finds himself complete when he straps on his wooden leg at the knee. But even more so, his mind comes to feel that the leg is part of a whole, so that if you kick him in the peg, he might utter a curse of pain, phantom nerves trailing up from the wooden appurtenance. In this very fashion, I can't explain it any other way, as Daglish stroked my triangle bush, I discovered that it had joined with me, as me, an appendage that had been missing from my person my whole life, without my realizing it, and which my mind and soul had incorporated into my whole to assuage a hunger that, until sated, had been so ever present for so long that I had never grown truly mindful of it, balm and succor to my empyrean degloving. The stroke of Daglish's rough fingers traced a gentle V shape down the fabric that sent a velvety shudder up the wires of my back. The calluses in his fingers worried the weft of burlap, and my mind knew their rough texture by spooky action. The fabric more sensitive to the friction of his touch than the thinnest, most nervy skin elsewhere on my person. With eyes closed, there existed no difference between the triangle and myself. Distinction collapsed. It was on me and of me and in me, and the prodding of his fingers overwhelmed me, so that I moaned and lost all shape in myself, the contour lines of my body collapsing and rearranging themselves into shining triangular pleasure. My groans shifted down into a deep hadoplegic hum, vibrating apart into pulsing particulate all that had once been seemed my solid unitary fate. Thank you.
Thank you. And appreciate the slight
I got a
accent you
lumberjack
do as you read
voice.
that.
Yeah, yeah, I do it. I can't do it without a lumberjack voice. Yeah.
Was that voice in your head as you were writing? Or is this an
Yeah, it's a little
afterlife?
faded. It's a little faded, but yeah, I wrote the whole thing like picture like I kind of like said it aloud in this like fake lumberjack voice that I came up with for myself
Yeah.
as I wrote. And it was like and the cadence too, like to read it, like I had this like cadence that I gave this narrator. So I had to like, I can't read it. It sounds ridiculous if I read it as me. I have to read it as if I'm just like in the like a Midwestern American saying it,
Yeah.
with
No,
some
no,
vocal
it's
fry or whatever.
yeah, no vocal fry in
Yeah. And the
the
lumberjack.
logging Northwest, no. But yeah, but the pacing of it I think is like really striking as you read it then, but also as you read it on the page. Like this voice is so particular, right? He has his own way of
Mhm.
constructing sentences. Sometimes he goes
Yeah.
off into these long kind of poetic bits and then
Yeah.
goes straight back to the real kind of hard Scrabble language. I
Yeah.
think it's just like fascinating. I didn't even know where to start with this passage. Like,
Well, let me set it up a little bit. Now that I've
yeah,
read it
yeah, of
aloud, I
course.
think I need to explain to readers who haven't read it. So basically, this is a stag dance in the woods. There are all these lumberjacks in the woods, and they are lonely. It's the wintertime, and they put on this dance where some of the men attend the dance as women. And if you want to go to the dance as a woman, you cut out a little triangle of burlap fabric and you pin it. This is historically true, by the way. You take that fabric triangle and you pin it on your crotch to signify like essentially a bush, and then the other men will dance with you as a woman. And so what happens here is that the main character, Babe Bunyan, who's this like huge, tall, he considers himself like quite rough-hewn, ugly, like logger specimen of like masculinity, decides he's going to go to the dance as a woman. And so what this scene is actually happening is he's got the triangle pinned on his crotch, and this guy that he's kind of interested in starts rubbing the triangle, and in a kind of like the way that like a prosthetic or an appendage could work, where like your body begins to like treat that appendage or prosthetic as part of your body, he starts feeling pleasure from the guy rubbing the triangle, which is not actually part of his body, but he begins to think of it as part of his body, which is the comparison in his mind to like someone with a wooden leg or any sort of prosthetic. And so this for me was like kind of doing a little bit of like trans theory, or like different types of theory about prosthetics, and like what actually constitutes a body. How does the mind you know incorporate objects into your body, even something as relevant to now as like the way so much of my thinking can be outsourced to my phone, that like my phone is
Mm,
part of my mind and it becomes part of how
yeah.
you go through the world. If you don't have your phone, you're like, oh my god, something's wrong. And it's like that, the way your body ends up treating objects, whether it be your glasses, whether it be your phone, whether it be your leg, or if you're a trans person trying to change your body, whether it be some sort of gendered thing, like if you didn't have hair, your wig, or
Mhm.
whatever. And in this case, it's his triangle,
Yeah.
his signifier of his womanhood, for in the most like stripped down kind of way.
Yeah. But even that is like, it's not in another person's hands. This might be like a little bit obvious. But when I first read this, I'll tell you, I actually got quite emotional in this moment. There was
Yeah,
it was on me and of me and in me. I was like, whoa, like this story kind of goes all over the place,
yeah,
kind of tone wise, I think. But
yeah,
here, there's a real like thinking through that's like kind of funny. So
yeah,
his mind comes to feel that leg as part of a whole. So if you kick him in the peg, etc. But like he straps on his wooden leg. Like I can't help but hear like strap on, right?
strap on,
In
yeah,
but
totally. And
also,
that's
and whether you intended that or not, but like there's also the strap on. It's like inverting it in a way, right? Because what we're actually
yeah,
talking about is this piece of fabric that's symbolizing a different kind of body part, right? So
yeah,
like the idea that it's a
yeah,
strap on already is playing with the idea that like the
yeah,
body isn't so knowable, right? That the part is just a part, right? It's like,
yeah,
call it synecdoche or metonym or whatever, where the part is standing in
yeah,
for the whole. But also, like, you do say whole, I think, twice in here as well. And like with WH, but
yeah,
like there are lots of like oral puns here, AU, that I think are
yeah,
quite funny, but also really pointing at like the kind of unknowability of the body, as well as,
yeah.
its undoing, if you like.
Yeah, it's I'm trying to look this through. This is an interesting one. So I think I was amusing myself as I wrote it. But usually when I'm amusing myself, it's also like when I do actually feel something like emotionally. Essentially, I was trying to describe like, I probably most people know I'm trans, but I'll just out myself right now. I am trans. and how it feels sometimes to, as a trans person, to sleep with different people of different bodies, and the way that, like, the first time I slept with, let's say, like a trans guy,
Mm.
and the way that our bodies produced all these feelings that didn't necessarily correspond always to the bodies that we had, and the ways that, like, our minds and our actions and our way of doing this, and that, like, there's something kind of like, this is why I think, like, sex is an interesting topic to write about, is that sex is a place in which you can actually transcend your body, and that's, you can do it in this, like, queer way where we were talking about that, about what your body actually is and what it makes you feel, despite whatever, particular setup,
Yeah.
and accessories that you have. But I think that's also true, even just for, like, the most straightforward
Yep.
vanilla sex in, like, a romance book. Like, sex is the moment where people transcend their bodies, where the bodies, it gets spiritual, it gets beyond the physical somehow, even as the method, the route to arrive to that transcendent place is physicality.
Yeah.
So, you can kind of do magic things with bodies and sex. And I don't think that this is something actually totally unique to trans people, but I do think that trans people have had to develop a language and a lens around it. And so it can get quite technical, it can get quite theoretical when
Yep.
one talks about it. And to me, like, a lot of the fun with this kind of language is basically like, well, I don't want to talk about it the way Judith Butler would talk about it. Let me talk about it the way, like, a lumberjack
Yeah.
might try to face some of those ideas. I think, for me, the most important thing, like, I didn't notice the whole, whole life and these kinds of puns actually until you just pointed it out. For me, I think what I wanted more than anything was the rhythm,
Yeah.
like a sort of tumbling, so
Yep.
that like, if you're picturing that the other guy is essentially fingering him,
Yep.
and rubbing his fingers on the triangle, not fingering him, but fingering essentially the triangle, which is a symbol for, women's genitalia, that it is building. There's like the friction is building. We're building
Yep.
towards something. And, in the paragraph that I didn't read, which is next, there's a ridiculous orgasm
Yeah.
scene
Yeah.
where he barks like a seal as he orgasms.
Yeah.
And some of this actually is that I wanted the rhythm of the language, even as it's so highfalutin,
Yeah.
to use a lumberjack word, to be quite rhythmic
Yeah.
in the build of, so that by the end you do get those lines like, with eyes closed, there existed no difference between the triangle and myself. Distinction collapsed. It was on me and of me and in me, and the prodding of his fingers overwhelmed me so that I moaned and lost all shape of myself, the contour lines of my body collapsing and rearranging themselves into shining triangular pleasure. The groans shifted down into deep. That word hydroplegic we could talk about that. It's a problematic word in this whole thing. There's two really problematic words
Oh,
in
okay.
this for tone in this sense. But deep had a pelagic hum, vibrating apart into pulsing particulate, all that had once seemed my solid unitary fate. So the,
Yeah.
the rhythm changes right at the end of the
Yeah.
thing, but you get the da 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 da
Yeah.
da 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 in the rhythm, which I didn't do like by like scanning it. And I'm
Hmm.
not a writer who like scans and does, but I just say it aloud to get like an approximation of rhythm. I'm not actually like trying to find a perfect meter in it. I'm not that. I mean, I would love to be that kind of writer, but I'm not. And then, at the very last line, you get a sort of a shift, and then you get the joke of the guy, in the
Yeah.
next line, he goes, oh yeah, Douglas orc like a seal. Oh yeah, yeah. And so it's like this, he's having
Yeah.
he's jerking off as this is happening, and it's totally, it's a joke. Like it's,
Yeah.
it's just like low. It's like to have this thing, and so that was like, so that last line, my groans shifted down into a deep hadopelagic hum. Hadopelagic is like, was it's the deepest layer of the ocean, I
Ah.
think, is it's in the oceanography. And so that word is totally anachronistic. It's totally like, a lumberjack likely wouldn't know the word hadopelagic. It probably wasn't even coined at this time. It's like a totally anachronistic word. And it was like the word that came to me, like being like so underwater, like so like the deep hum of the earth kind of thing. And I was like, I shouldn't use that word. That word is like, but I was like, I actually don't think that most people know what that word is. They don't know it's anachronistic. And like, we're just kind of going on feel.
Yeah.
And what I wanted like a super high language technical word that gets contrasted with something as ridiculous as like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he orked like a seal in the contrast of those things. There's another thing that's totally anachronistic in this, which is my mind knew their rough texture by spooky action, which,
Mm.
spooky action, the physics concept
Mm.
also had not been discovered in the 1800s. But like this, I think has to do with also like my general feelings towards like this language is totally made up in the first
Yeah.
place. Like
Yeah.
I found a book of lumberjack slang from 1941 that was collected by the children of lumberjacks, and I used the slang from the lumberjack books in this, but then I kind of like came up with like a cadence and way of talking that was like pretty much invented. I read a couple of different books. Like I read Blood Meridian by Cormac
Mhm.
McCarthy, and I was like, this book is totally ridiculous. Like there's no chance that like a bunch of like cowboys, like
You're
everyone's like, oh, this book is so poetic, and but it's like, yeah, that this book is like a fever dream, like a very 1980s fever dream.
right.
It is not like it is like this is what like a dude in 1980s thinks is like really incredible language,
Yep.
and there's zero chance that anybody on the border of Texas was talking this way. And like even something like Moby Dick is, so these American classics are kind of
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
ridiculous in their cadence and the things that they say. What what is the kind of shit that Ishmael's saying is a joke. A book like A Brief History of Seven Killings,
Mm.
the Marlon James book, which I love, I think it's incredible, but the Jamaican kind of patois that is in it, I think is, as far as I know, not at all how Jamaicans
Hmm.
talk. There's something kind of created. There's like Jamaican slang, but something is created language wise in there. And so I was basically like, I actually think that like creating these anachronistic languages don't work if one is too faithful to them.
Right.
And so I just was like, by the time I was writing this, which was at the end of the book, I was like, spooky action is a physics word that nobody would know, and it makes no sense. But neither does the idea that the cowboys in Blood Meridian are speaking in the cadence in Shakespearean
Yeah.
King James cadences or
Yeah.
whatever, Shakespearean or King James, I should say.
Yeah, but it's like we don't. I mean, I don't go to historical fiction for like that accuracy. I know some people do,
Yeah,
but like
yeah,
why turn to a novel about a time period? Like if you want like accuracy
yeah,
or something, like go to the source material or something. But here you're translating a particular person in a particular moment for us now, right? So like
yeah,
we're not in that moment. And I think, as soon as you read tailing up from the wooden appurtenance, which appurtenance is a
yeah,
great word,
yeah,
like you don't mind how to police, like I'm not going to look up like, oh, did they know that word
yeah,
then, right? Like it's the
yeah,
sound as well. Like it's the moments when he is describing something so difficult, right? He says like, I can't explain it any other way. Like he's
yeah,
grasping for ways to translate this experience he's having that he never expected to have to
yeah,
us as reader. So like we do just grasp for whatever word or phrase we have in our
yeah,
vocabulary, right? Maybe words I would never say out loud to friends, but like
yeah,
sometimes I'm in a room and I'm like, oh, this is the only way I know how to say it. And I think
yeah,
there's some like fun there, right? To go from appurtenance to
yeah,
stroked my triangle bush, which is just like up against each other, produce like a literal friction, like a linguistic friction that
yeah,
is then
yeah,
happening in the scene as well. But even an appendage that had been like again appendage, right? Like in another world, like you'd imagine the appendage is something a different kind of sex
yeah,
object,
yeah,
right? On body
yeah,
part. But we're talking about this like triangle of material with all of the historical weight of the triangle, right? For like queer
yeah, yeah,
folks, which again
yeah.
we're reading now, but like at the time didn't.
Right. Yeah, it would have been before World War II or before the reclamation of it. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. But I even in your like bio, you say like the book is about trans life, past, present, and future, right?
Yeah,
And there's a sense of that historical movement, right? Like yes, it's set in a time, but it's speaking to us now, right?
yeah,
Why write historical fiction in the present if you're not talking about the present too, right? Like it has to kind of go back and forth. But that appendage that had been missing from my person my whole life without my realizing it. And that's like a big thought, right, for this book. Like
yeah,
we're so certain of our bodies sometimes, or some people are.
yeah,
The moment of this guy who is so like, macho, butch, like manly man finds out something about himself by accident almost, right? He's
Mhm.
intrigued about what it means to be like the woman in the stag dance. Like there's something that kind of exciting about it, but I guess he doesn't know
Yeah.
why. But the idea of this piece of material replacing the body part that he has then, and which my mind and soul had incorporated into my whole to assuage a hunger that until sated
My
is
whole
ever
there, I
like,
did get that. I think that pun was actually unintentional. Now that
that
you
is
say it out
great
loud,
though,
I'm like,
right?
oh, yeah.
Had been so ever present for so long, I had never truly grown mindful of it. Like he's asking us to consider, like, we think we know our bodies, but like I don't think you do. Like, have you ever sat to think about your body? You know,
Yeah.
and if this is like quote unquote trans theory in literary form, right? It's like, yeah, trans folks have to think about their bodies, but like, when have you cis people done that
Yeah.
properly? Have you ever
Yeah.
sat down to be like, how do I experience my body?
Yeah.
And he's here in this moment being like, who knew? And I think it's just like a
Yeah.
beautiful moment. Even in the comedy, I was like, I like felt it in my soul.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad. I mean, that's what I was going for in this is like, and I think that like the tonal shifts that you're talking about have to do with like destabilizing what,
Yeah,
for a reader, whether you're supposed to laugh, whether you're supposed to cry, and then even within a single paragraph, I think it like a little bit wrong puts the reader emotionally
yeah,
in a way that I think opens up a space for feeling things.
yeah.
That's like that's what I'm intending to do, but I'm also, I notice that in writing that I really love.
Mm,
Sometimes when I'm wrong-footed, my defenses fall down, and then, just a line of like real emotion will just kind of hit me,
yeah.
because I was laughing or something, and then, oh, whoops, there's a tragedy or something.
Yeah, just like another little idea that you're like, wait, I didn't
Yeah,
know we were
yeah,
here. I mean, and like after, as you say, like barman sucker to my Empyrean degloving. Ugh, what a beautiful phrase.
yeah,
Given the like horror that it's describing.
yeah,
I was like, should we discuss that passage? And I reread it. I was like, absolutely not. I'm not putting this
yeah,
out there. Like, it's such a horrific scene, but again, it's part of the body at its most extreme, right?
yeah,
Which
yeah,
I think you do in most of these stories and in Detransition Baby, right? Like the body not as solid, knowable, but as always like precarious, always kind of open, right?
yeah,
I love the phrase, the fabric more sensitive to the friction of his touch than the thinnest, most nervy skin elsewhere on my person. Just like a great way of the
yeah.
thinnest, most nervy skin. Like I don't know. That's like a summary of like so much of your work, right? The skin as so like volatile in a way.
Yeah. No, it's a very flattering read. I mean, I guess this is the fun of close reading is that you get to, and also as a the indulgent get to be indulged as an author and be like, look what you did there, that pun, and it's like, whoops, I didn't know I did that, but yes, I did. What incredible work on my
You did
part.
it, Tori.
Yeah,
I mean, the one thing I do want to ask about is, I mean, this is very technical, right? With eyes closed, there existed no difference between the triangle and myself. Colon. Distinction collapsed. Semicolon. It was on me and of me and in me. Like that colon double, like semicolon
yeah,
double thing, like is a real, I don't know, it's like expansive, but then it's like breaking, and then the sentence like unfurls. And I guess that's more part of the rhythm stuff you were talking about earlier, but I'm just like, why
yeah.
colon and a colon? What are you doing?
Let's see. Okay, so why would it be that way? Let's see. I wrote this probably 2 or 3 years ago, so it's a little
Yeah.
hard to remember exactly why I chose the punctuation. But with eyes closed, there existed no difference between the triangle and myself. So and then there you have an elaboration of the no difference between
Yeah.
the triangle and myself, which is colon distinction collapsed,
Yeah.
which is in itself like a complete sentence. Distinction
Yeah.
collapsed,
Yeah.
and then, so it wouldn't make sense to have a comma next. And then we have what is meant to be a sort of run on in the rhythm. So I think that's, the run on is all basically qualifying. I mean, you could do a period after Overwhelm Me, period, I moaned,
Mm,
but I wanted it to
that run.
keep running,
Yeah.
keep running the way that, like, again, because it was meant to be like masturbatory.
And both that literal act, but also the
Yeah.
kind of like swelling of like experience that is like outside of oneself, right? Like it overwhelmed me and I lost all shape of myself, the contour lines of my body collapsing and rearranging. Like how do
The-
you write that unless you make the language and sentence kind of unfurl,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and I think that some of the choices here, punctuation choices for me, I have like a way that I feel them
Yeah.
emotionally, rather than like, because basically I would say that like my understanding of punctuation is mostly Strunk and White. Like having read Strunk and White in like college and like memorized the rules of Strunk and White, as refers to when to use a semicolon or when to use a comma, which is quite pedantic, and then so I'm like, here's the basic rules that I memorized 20 years ago,
Yep.
and then I just kind of do it by feel after that, and the nice thing also with publishing on a press like Random House is that you have quite good, again, wish I could take credit for all things, you have quite good copy editors. The copy editor for Random House is oh, he just retired, but my first book, Benjamin Dreyer is his name. He did 30 years of copy editing at Random House, and he wrote, and he Random House has a very, unlike sort of like New Yorker again, and I think this is a little bit different than like British standardized British things, but Benjamin Dreyer did 30 years at Random House as a copy editor, and really kind of like came up with a sort of like house style and standards
Hmm.
for how you can do the copy editing and the punctuation and what words to use, that is much more flexible elaboration of something like Strunk and White. And then he trained an entire sort of crew of copy editors at Random House. It was markedly different. I mean, people are like, how come you choose this or how come you choose that? Everything that I published before I was at Random House, I mostly copy edited myself.
Yeah.
And then when I got to Random House and I was working with Benjamin Dreyer and also his team, like they are pretty incredible at not just knowing all the rules of it, but knowing the rules of punctuation, grammar, of usage, but of knowing how to break them and how to do it.
Mm.
So when you get back a manuscript from one of them, they have done just like they're the unsung heroes of a bunch of stuff. It's incredible what they do. For instance, for this, they actually created, they ended up recreating a glossary
Wow.
of lumberjack terms to make sure that I used all of the lumberjack slang that I found and sometimes invented,
Wow.
that I used it consistently across the book. So
Mm.
if I made up a word, let's say even like the word scooch in this book, I made up because the actual word that meant something similar had racist, like anti-Native American undertones, and I was just like,
Ye-
that's not the hill I'm going to die on
Yep.
for like historical accuracy. Like I'm using already spooky action. I'm not going to be like, well, it's historically accurate to use this racist term. It's like,
Yeah.
that was not what I wanted to do. So I made up some new terms to for this, and they made sure that everything that I made up was consistent across 200 pages in a way that even I was sick of double checking this stuff. I do want to say that like there's a kind of, when you look at like how come you chose a colon there or a
Yeah.
semicolon there, that there's a sort of like cult of the author, that the author is a brilliant poet who, it could only have been a colon,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think I probably wrote that, but it may have been, suggested to me by one of these truly like highly specialized, brilliant copywriters on the Random House team. And I kind of want to shout them out. I'm all for like my first book for self-published. They're full of typos. Like I'm all for self-publishing, but I also like want to give credit that I was a benefit, like on an artistic level, I was a beneficiary of these people.
Mm. I love. Thank you for sharing that. Maybe
Yeah,
stuff people don't have any idea about in a book, but people who are like highly trained and know what they're doing, like in
yeah. I mean,
2026, who knew?
this is like what, as people talk about AI and they talk
Yeah.
about all the, what gets written, and it's like, there's stuff, and it doesn't go into all books, not, and there's different standards across different countries, like translate, some countries they have and the size of the press and all this sort of stuff, but like sort of the heyday of the big five publishing and whatever these big publishers, like certainly problematic, but the heyday of it, they put together resources to help authors on an artistic level in ways that like I don't know if we'll ever see again. Even just your average commercial book went through like so much editing and reading and work that you can't reflect in an environment of AI or all this sort of stuff because it is not. This paragraph is probably like the result of a conversation between 4 or 5 different people who are like my editor, the copy editor, me. It's a really beautiful process when it works well, and I don't know if it's going to continue to exist, but I'm very grateful to have had it.
Yeah, I love hearing that. Before I ask you about I want to ask more about your writing because that's like a really way into it. I just love
Yeah,
that final sentence of the bit we talked, vibrating apart into pulsing particulate that had at
yeah,
once seemed my solid unitary fate. I think there's something also to say about this whole story about syntax, right? Like the ordering of the words too. It's not just like the rhythm that you were talking about earlier and the kind of vocabulary, but I just love that a pulsing particulate, that alliteration, but had
yeah,
once seemed my solid unitary fate. Like there's a real, like he feels like a real person, even though as you're saying
yeah,
there's some like anachronism and stuff. But I just love like the real push of language there that seemed my solid unitary fate. Such a great phrase to describe. I thought my body was one thing, and it's like
yeah,
so something else, right? And you could read that with Leo Bassani. You could read it, through all
yeah,
these different kind of thinkers, right? But in that moment, it's like, oh no, I get that. I get that.
yeah.
I just think it's just like a beautiful way. And then as you say it, then the next line is hilarious, like orgasm, but like really pushing language to extreme there in a way that is understandable, I think, for people.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I guess, something else that I've been thinking about is that, like, I've been thinking about it both in the style and again, like, a year out, a year and a half out from publication of this book. I think a lot about when people are willing to go with you on like a kind of idiosyncratic style journey and when they're not in something like this. And also like the different what audience you have at a particular time. Like I think that sure, you could read Ulysses in 1920 when everyone's excited about modernism. If you wrote Ulysses now, I mean, maybe there'd be some people who recognize it as a great book, and clearly, I think it's a great book. But I think that like you have to write to sort of the audience that you have in a moment. And so if I did like all sort of like super high modernist hijinks, I think then I want my audience just wouldn't come along. And so there's also like for me, I've been thinking a lot about gossip in writing. This not wasn't thinking about it then, but I'm thinking about it recently. That if you have something that's gossipy enough, people will come with you on it. So this is like they'll like follow you on a style journey if the payoff is like some gossip, some juicy gossipy thing. So even if we go back to something like Ulysses, like you know you can read this difficult modernist thing and the payoff is like, oh my god, he left while his wife was sleeping with another guy. Can you believe it? He's just walking around the city while she fucks that guy? And you're like, it's like you'll read whatever style stuff so you can get that like juicy gossipy
Mm,
payoff. And I think that like gossipy is oftentimes like sort of feminine coded, but I think it's especially in like that sort of like very macho modernist stuff. Like Sun Also Rises is a good book because it's just Hemingway being a huge bitch.
yep.
The opening thing about Robert Kahn that people like talk about, like he was a boxer, he was this, like that opening thing is like his nose was fucked up, he looked weird, we didn't talk to him. Like it's just with like it's so bitchy gossipy. And so I think that like when you go on these style journeys, for me, if I can make the payoff be something like really gossipy and ridiculous, which is like
Mm,
these two lumberjacks were like fumbling around each other's junk in a shed, there's a there's a payoff to this to the style that I think my audiences now are more willing to go on me on those journeys, on a style journey, if there's like a emotional, fun, juicy payoff. Whereas like if I try to do something that's like more high style on like more dry idea,
yeah.
I lose people. Like I just feel that, and I'm somebody who wants. I want my audience to come with me. If you pick up one of my books, yeah, sometimes I'm indulging myself, but like I want it to be a good time for you, the reader.
I mean, you're winning on that. Like all
Yeah,
this book, I was like flying through. Like this story in particular, I was like, I did not know what was coming at any point in this
Yeah.
story, right? Like, you know, you're kind of heading towards the dance. You're like, okay, the dance is going to happen, but
Yeah.
it could go any number of ways, right?
Yeah.
Like you're playing with fire quite literally with all of these guys, right? So I think thinking about it as gossip is hilarious. I'm not going to go through my just
Yeah.
shelves being like, oh, what is the gossip of this book? That's hilarious.
Yeah. I mean, some books are like obviously gossip. Like,
Yeah.
Middlemarch is like
Oh, God.
Middlemarch is a book of like just incredible gossip. I mean, I'm choosing all these classics just because I feel like people will have
Yeah.
probably read them. But like, it's a book like Middlemarch. You're like, I was in the church pew, and then he came in, and he didn't even look at me, and like, and you're like, and what it is like this incredible, like, psychic, perspicacious, psychological observations, but like, really, it's like he came to church, and I was standing there waiting for him to look at me, and he didn't even look at me. You know,
No, I'm
Great book. you know,
persuasion, right? Like persuasion is the same. Like,
same,
is
yeah,
he gonna come back?
totally,
Is he gonna look at me? He didn't even look at me. Like it's
yeah, yeah.
fantastic. Okay, I now want to teach a class called like just gossip.
I mean, there's all. I mean,
That could be
I
really fun.
like the opening, like every famous line, like all all family happy, all happy families are alike, except unhappy. Whatever, I'm paraphrasing the
Yeah,
Tolstoy line.
yeah.
Unhappy families are unique or whatever. I just butchered that, obviously, but but the point of it is like this family is fucked up. You can't believe what Oblonsky was doing. Like it's like that's great. That's all our literature right there.
Yeah. You're right.
Yeah,
Like you want the author to let you in, even while they're taking you
yeah,
somewhere else, right? Like, but
yeah,
you need that window, and if the
yeah,
window is like, I need to find out more about these wild people,
yeah,
it's just a great framework for thinking about if you are writing. If you are a writer, like,
yeah,
are you taking the reader in, or are you
yeah,
holding them at arm's length? Right? Like, I've read a lot.
yeah,
I'm just like, why?
yeah,
Why don't you want me to enjoy this? Like,
yeah,
like you can feel the author like not wanting to
yeah,
let some breathing room in. I want to know how you write, not in a, magical craft way, but rather, do you
yeah.
have like a standard setup? Are you typing? Are you doing it at the same time every day? Do you set yourself amounts, all that
I
kind
mean,
of stuff?
I've gone through different phases, like ideally I have like a routine, like for people who wonder why I'm like looking so sweaty here is that I'm living in Colombia and I had my time wrong. So I was like running on the shore here. And then I was like, wait, it's an hour earlier in Colombia from what I think they think I'm in New York. I gotta go. So, but I'm in Colombia. I've started coming to Colombia and spending where I've got a place, and I spend winters here, and I'm increasing spending more and more time here. And it's partially to like get out of sort of like the maelstrom of bullshit that living in the United States as a trans person and while trying to think about trans issues is right now. Like what is that famous Bella line? The moronic inferno or whatever. It's really hard to be like, I'm going to write a novel that's going to take me 3 years to write when every day is a manufactured, just like shit show, intentionally meant to distract your attention and not make you think about anything other than like the extreme short term. And I think that like a lot of the sort of like typical practices of a writer, like I'm gonna write every day at 5:30 in the morning or whatever, have always been to like sort of get away from the maelstrom of bullshit. But it seems increasingly more important in this era to do it. And I'm very lucky that, after Detransition Baby came out, I was in a position that I could spend half the year outside of the United States, which I'm so grateful for right now. I am like incredibly, incredibly American in my like worldview in ways that are I don't mean that as a as a positive, but it is how I am. And yet I need to be away from it to have any sort of perspective to think about it. So as a result, my writing is pretty bifurcated. Whether if I'm in the United States and I'm working on a project, I'm probably promoting something or trying to work on some other little side project or something while I'm in the States. And then I have these periods in which I go away and I try to either finish something or conceive of something. Like right now, I've been here whatever since January, It's April now. I don't know when this gets posted, but so I've been here like 3 months. And largely the work that I was doing here wasn't like sitting down and writing every day, even though I intended it to be. I was trying to write this mystery kind of thing, and I realized that it wasn't working, and that like the mystery was not the plot worked, but like, do I care about this? Is this of value? Does it speak to the moment? And the answer was no. And I sort of conceived of it in the United States, and then had to come here and had this like time to think. And in that time to think, I was like, wait, this doesn't work. What might work instead? What do I actually care about? Can I have some time to connect with myself, to project into the future and think about what is a project that would excite me and that I could do for 3 years? How might I execute it, both like artistically, logistically, financially? And then once I have that project and I look at what my life is like in the particular moment, I can set up my life for that project in that time. But like the idea that like you're going to come up with a method of writing that's going to just, this is going to be good for me forever, it doesn't work that way, I've found. I came up with something when I was writing Detransition Baby, which was a desperate time in my life. I sort of found this like equilibrium where I was able to like write pretty frequently, maybe 3, 4 days a week in the afternoon. It took me like I was like just fucking around a lot for like 2 or 3 years, but when I had to finish it, I had this like sort of like it was this period of flow for like 7 months where I sort of was able to carve out these spaces, usually 1 p.m. in the afternoon, couple times a week, 3 times a week, 4 times a week for about 6 months. And that was great. That does not work with my life right now. It doesn't
Yeah.
work with how it is, And so what I've discovered is instead this process of like, what is my project? What am I doing? What does my life look like right now? And how do I not think about being a writer who has a routine, but how do I think about setting up my life to execute this particular project? How do I conceive of it and execute it versus for the period of time that I think it will take 2, 3 years and sustain a lifestyle
Yeah.
that makes that work.
That's fascinating. I think like, yeah, it's such a different way of, I think lots of people talk about like, as you say, like the fetishization of practice above all, or like, I'm just going
Yeah.
to go and I'm going to do the thing. And I'm like, but as you're saying, like, what does it mean to like organize a life? But how do you tap into, that's a bigger question though, right? Like, how do I tap into the thing I want to write about, the thing that will make sense to me, the thing that might speak to the moment? Like, those are much harder questions, I think, than
Yeah.
saying, today I'm going to write 900 words or whatever.
But I think that's the problem with that. This is again where the fetishization of craft gets in, isn't it? Like if you just say that you're going to write 900 words a day, which whatever, it's like going to the gym or something.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
butt in the chair, make yourself do it.
Yeah.
That's great. But when is the moment when you can actually look up? If you're just telling yourself the most important thing is 900 words, at what point do you look up and be like, actually, I've been putting 900 words a day in something that sucks? And I want 2 years back. The idea that this is going to work for everybody. Or you say, I want 900 words a day, and you came up with that idea,
Mm.
and then you had a kid, or you got pregnant, or it's like this idea that there's a oftentimes in practice it looks the same, but the stages in which you write a book, they're not the same. If the
Mm.
beginning of a book is not the same as the middle of a book, is not the same as the end of a book, and your life doesn't look the same. So it's God, it'd be great if there was like a just a one size fits all regimen for all books and all people at all times. But I don't think that's how anything gets made ever.
This is why I write poems, because I just can
Yeah,
borrow a snatch of time, and
yeah,
it's very where am I at emotionally, physically, and
yeah,
either it will come out in one go or it will be
yeah,
a few lines. I'm like, I'll come back to that in a year because I can't look at that, like
yeah, totally.
yeah, no, that's really fascinating. Do you have an early memory of when you first wrote? Like, were you writing as a kid? Did you think I want to be a writer as a kid or not?
No, I think I'm a reader
Yeah.
far before I'm a writer. If you had to be like Torrey, you could never read again, or Torrey, you could never write again, I would happily choose never write again over never reading again. And I think that the fact that I write is an offshoot of the fact that I read. What happened, I think, to become a writer is that simply at some point I don't think I wrote anything much until I was in college. And it was simply that, like, I had an assignment to write something. And then I had read so much that when it was my turn to write, I had this well of past readings to pull from so that, like, I mean, I don't mean to sound arrogant, but like what I wrote was better than other people wrote. And then I was like, oh, I might be good at this. But it was
Yeah.
like the reasoning was not like I'm gonna be good at this. It was that I had this like, kind of like this well of fuel or something that was just words built up in my mind. I've tried to refine that, but my project now, like, I'm in Colombia and my next book is going to have a lot to do with it's gonna big pieces of it are gonna take place in Mexico and there's gonna be research. And my Spanish is okay right now. And I need my Spanish to be really good to be able
Yeah.
to do what is
Yeah.
next. And so my big writing project right now is not a reading or conceiving or whatever project. It is that I need my Spanish to be much, much better than it is. So like what am I reading right now? I am reading the romantasy books. I'm reading them all in Spanish. Like I'm reading A Court of Thorns and Roses and the dragon ones because it turns out that that's exactly my level of Spanish right now. I can just like fly through them and I'm collecting like thousands of fairy based words in my brain in Spanish, which, if you read my next book, you're like, why is everything in Spanish
Yeah. Yeah.
so fairy? Why is everyone wearing a wreath on their head? It's like, well, that's the Spanish but hopefully I get, move on to other books, but it's like, I don't actually care what I need now to do this project, what I need language wise is
Yeah.
like I need raw material. And
Hmm.
I'm just like, and these books, you can fly through them.
Yep.
There, other people want to talk about them. So I'm
Yeah.
just reading tons of them. Even as I'm like, would I ever write something like this? Would I ever read it in English? No. But it's perfect for what I
Yeah.
need right now. And I'm on book 2 of the Court of Thorns and Roses. I'm on book 1 of the just finished the first of the Yaros dragon books, and who knows what order. But it's like I've been doing this like the last couple of weeks, and like it feels like a writing project.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
just say, even though it doesn't look like a writing project to anybody
Right.
else.
That's also useful though. Like writing is all of the stuff that comes with, it's
Yeah,
not just the sentences, but brilliant. Okay, so if we see a dragon suddenly appear in this new
yeah,
book, like we're like, "Ooh, Corey's really into like elves right
yeah.
now." Um
What's funny is actually, I know that there's things in the English books that are like also weird anachronisms. Like people have told me
mm,
that Court of Thorns and Roses, like that apparently the phrase "haul ass" in English is all over those books.
oh
That
really?
they're always hauling ass to places,
That's so funny.
which is not. They did not translate that literally into the Spanish. I found. But some things are translated very literally into Spanish, including the phrase "balls to the wall" was was translated literally into into Spanish, and
I love it.
I was like, "What is this?" Wow. Oh, it's balls to the wall. So if you get a few balls to the wall in my next book,
I yeah, can't wait.
it's the traces of these fairy books.
Yeah, I love an idiom just translated into straight.
Yeah, yeah,
Perfect.
yeah.
Okay, final question. Book recommendations. I ask everyone for this at the end. Like anything you want to recommend to listeners, stuff that you come back to, classics, things that are not out yet,
Yeah.
anything you want.
Uh, I'm always a fan of like one of my favorite books of all time is Independent People by Halldór Laxness, the Icelandic book about a sheep farmer. Laxness won the Nobel in '52, largely on the strength of this book. It was translated by a British guy who only translated one book in his entire life, and it took him 7 years. And it was this book, Independent People. And I think he might have been a genius. Like I don't speak Icelandic, but I was reading papers where the Icelandic people were like, we would never have thought to translate it this way. And it's incredible. And I've read other Laxness books and they're in English, they do not have this like weird zest
Yeah.
that Independent People has. And I think it has to do with this one particular translator. The marriage of the translator
Yeah.
and Laxness in English for the book Independent People produced. I mean, it is one of my favorite books of all time, and it is a funny. It sounds. If I tell you what it's about a Icelandic sheep farmer who just looks at his sheep all day and has fights with his daughter. You'd be like, that sounds like a bad book, but actually, it is so funny, so human, so full of drama and myth, and like he's incorporating all these like old Icelandic myths into it, and a lot about the passage of time in history, in much the way that like I think is sort of a precursor to like the magical realism of Garcia
Mm.
Marquez or something, or there's something Faulknerian about it. Like it's an incredible. It should be talked about as like a 20th century masterpiece in the same way as all these other books in my mind. It just happens to be an Icelandic. I'll say independent people. There's a book, there's a writer here in Colombia who I think is quite good, Juan Gabriel Vasquez, who wrote a book, really good book about, his most famous book is The Sound of Things Falling, El Ruido de Cosas al Caer, I think it is in Spanish. And terrific book that sort of does a little bit of like an auto fiction thing, but then into like just a full fictional crazy take on the drug war and Escobar and all this stuff. Incredible book. 2011 that one came out in. I think it was on the Booker International list at the time. Really, and really like pioneering his own kind of Latin American form of fiction at the moment. So I'll say him. And then I'm going to say a book that I've never read, but which is not against your thing. But
No.
there's this
Good.
book that the reason I do is I want other people to read it, and I'll read it too, and then they'll have people to talk about with it when it comes out.
Yeah.
Well, there's this book. It's going to be called Vastlands: The Crossing, and I think it comes out in 2020 in September, or maybe it's June of this year. I'm not sure, but it is a translation of this Brazilian book in Portuguese called Gran Sertão that everybody who can read Portuguese says is the greatest book ever written. And they're like, this is better than Shakespeare. They say it's the greatest book ever written. And it's written in a Brazilian vernacular Portuguese that is almost untranslatable. And so they tried to translate it in 1953. It did not. The people were like, this doesn't work. It's not good. Anyway, there's this Australian woman named Alison Entreckin, I want to say. She's a translator of Portuguese. And she's been working on this book for like 12 years, trying to recreate, and this is very lumberjack, idiom kind of stuff, recreate in English the idiom, the Brazilian Portuguese idiom of this like backwater Amazonian. He's like a thug. He's like a thug crossing like this thing, but so like it's like a mobster,
Yeah.
like rural mobster Brazilian Amazonian language, untranslatable. And anyway, it's coming out in English after literally 70 years and failed attempts. And everyone says I sound like Donald Trump. Everyone's saying Alison Andrikin
All of
has
the
really
people.
succeeded. Yeah,
Yeah.
everyone. They all love it. But that is what everyone's saying. And so take it with a grain of salt that I haven't read it, but everyone else is saying this is the book. And I'm very curious about it. So I'll say
Wow.
that one too.
Okay, well, everyone, when it comes out, we'll all go buy it, and then we'll just
Or
call
by
Torrey up, and we'll do like a book club or something as soon as it comes out.
yeah. This is what I want. I want to hear about what
Okay.
people think. So that's an idiosyncratic collection of books that I
No, but
just
they're
said.
great.
But
This
they
is what
are
we
great.
need.
Yeah.
No, like, there's the books everyone knows, but I'm really interested in those other things that people love or, you want to thrust in people's hands. So I appreciate them. Torrey, thank you so much for your time. I so appreciate this.
Oh, this is wonderful. Really fun. Really, really very charming. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode. For more on trans writing, you might want to go back to episode 16 with Harry Nicholas, or for fiction about gender and the body more generally, you could also go to episode 13 with Okchukwu and Zelu. Please subscribe if you haven't already, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or on YouTube, and share with people in all the places. Follow the show and me on Instagram, tag me in any posts of episodes you like, and if you can, please fill out the feedback form linked in the show notes. You can also get transcripts and more information about the show by subscribing to the Substack. The podcast was made possible by an Impact Accelerator Award from the University of Hertfordshire and the Arts and Humanities Research Council.